Have you ever seen a headline that just makes you go, wait, what? That's exactly what happened recently with this massive trade deal between the US and India. First, we hear that India is going to stop buying Russian oil. Huge news. But then, almost immediately, Russia comes out and says, that's not happening at all. So, what is the real story here? Okay, let's dig in and unpack this.
This is the big question, right? Did India actually agree to cut ties with one of its biggest energy suppliers? I mean, you've got two of the world's most powerful nations putting out completely opposite stories about the same deal. So in this explainer, we're going to get to the bottom of it and try to figure out what's really going on.
And here it is, plain as day. On one hand, you have the White House claiming this major diplomatic victory, saying India is ditching Russian oil, and on the other hand, you have Russia firing back, basically saying, we have no idea what you're talking about. You really can't get more contradictory than that. It's a classic case of he said, she said on a global scale.
Okay, so to solve this puzzle, we actually have to rewind the clock a little bit. This deal didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually came on the heels of some seriously tense and you could even say aggressive talk coming from the United States. Let's take a look at what the mood was like just a few months ago.
So what's really key here is the tone. I mean, listen to that. Just a little while ago, you had U.S. officials like Howard Lutnick publicly saying that India needed to come to the table and apologize, that they needed to leave the BRICS alliance and, of course, stop buying Russian oil. The language wasn't just firm. It was, well, it was incredibly demanding.
So how in the world do we get from India will say they're sorry to a friendly photo op for a trade deal? Well, this timeline shows you the diplomatic chess match pretty clearly. The US came in strong with these aggressive demands. India's response, through their national security advisor, was just as strong. They essentially said, look, if that's how you're going to talk to us, we'll just wait for the next guy. And it seems like that firm stance really worked, forcing a complete change in the US approach, from aggressive to complementary.
All right, so that's the political backstory, but diplomacy and press statements are one thing. The hard, cold facts of the global energy market, that's a whole different ballgame. Now let's get into the practical, on-the-ground reality of India's oil situation, because this is where the rubber really meets the road.
This one chart tells you almost everything you need to know. Russia isn't some small-time supplier for India. We're talking about nearly 40% of the country's crude oil. 40%. Just stopping that flow isn't like flipping a switch. It's a foundational piece of their entire energy infrastructure.
And it gets even stickier from there. It's not just about finding someone else with oil to sell. There are some huge practical roadblocks. First up, time. You can't just replace 40% of a country's oil supply overnight. That would take months, maybe even years to sort out. Second, and this is a big one, refineries. India's refineries are literally built and fine-tuned to process the specific kind of crude oil that comes from Russia. Switching would mean a massive and incredibly expensive industrial overhaul. Third, the cost. Russia gives them a pretty sweet discount, and from a purely economic view, that's hard to walk away from. And finally, you have simple logistics. Shipping oil all the way from the US is just a lot slower and more complicated than their current setup.
So, on one side, you have all this diplomatic pressure, and on the other, you have these hard economic and logistical facts. So now we can finally start putting all the pieces together and get a clear picture of what this deal is really about.
Now, this is where you have to pay really close attention to the language. At first, the word used was that India would purchase $500 billion worth of goods. But then a spokesperson switched to the word investment. And as you can see, those two words mean very, very different things. A purchase is a straightforward sale. An investment is a much longer-term, more complex financial deal. That little switch in vocabulary is a massive clue that the details here might be a bit fuzzy.
And so here's our verdict. When you put everything together, it seems pretty clear that India has not agreed to eliminate Russian oil. What's much more likely is that they're continuing their long-standing policy of diversification. They want to avoid being too dependent on any one country. So they're probably buying more from the US, for sure, but they are adding a supplier, not swapping one out. It's the classic strategy of not putting all your eggs in one basket.
This whole episode leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on. In the world of high-stakes international deals, where every single word is calculated, is the first public statement we hear ever really the whole story? It's definitely something to keep in mind the next time a big headline like this drops. Thanks so much for watching.